Today, I'm going to give you 7 wealth building lessons that I learned from the classic book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, you may be asking, well, Jeff, who has time to read a book? Well, if you want to emulate what the rich do, then you're going to have to learn to become a reader. Why? Well, most rich people have linked much of their success with their reading habits, especially those that are interested in building wealth and those that are interested in financial advice. Well, before we get into the 7 wealth building lessons, let me give you a very quick background about the book, and then we'll shift gears into those lessons. Way back in 1926, the author of the book, George Clason, he wrote a collection of parables that took place in the ancient city of Babylon. These stories eventually turned into the financial classic, again, which is known as The Richest Man in Babylon. Even though it was written almost a century ago, the book is still often referenced because of its timeless principles on wealth creation and money. Now, a little bit of background about Babylon. It was once the richest city in the world, known for its lavish houses and palaces, all protected by these huge, massive walls. It was actually founded around 2300 BC and located along the Euphrates River, which is actually in present day Iraq. It created fertile farmland where once there had been a desert through the use of irrigation. Now, all forms of lending back then, all forms of lending and borrowing within the city were very, very highly developed, especially at that time in history. And because of this, it made doing this and living there extremely prosperous. So the success of Babylon really inspired the author to write several stories, including the one that has become known as the book. Many of his stories discuss principles of finance and money management, and then they were taken by different companies like banks, insurance companies, and other employers. And these employers took these and gave them to their employees to teach them the benefits of saving money and hard work. Now, the whole book is behind a story, and it's about two friends, Banzer, which is a chariot builder, and then Kobe, who was a musician. They both were very good at what they did, but like probably many people that you know, they had zero money. Now, one day they decided to visit Arcad, who was not only one of their best childhood friends, but Mr. Arcad was also the richest man in Babylon. So they asked him why he thought that they had no money because, they worked hard, they did all kinds of stuff, but they still, after it's all said and done, they were broke. So the lessons that Arcad gave them, which he calls the 7 cures to a lean purse, are wise wealth building habits that anyone can follow to build a solid financial foundation. So let's get right into the 7 wealth building lessons from the book. Lesson number 1, pay yourself first. Now, as you can imagine, this is the top lesson in the book. Now, Arcad was faced with a very similar situation, similar to Banser and Kobe. Now, he told a story of how he once was a scribe and kind of like them, that he didn't have much money. And he went to a very, very wealthy person, an old wealthy man, and he sought his advice. And this man basically gave him the secret to wealth in exchange for Arcad working for him, transcribing on these clay tablets. And he said, sure, I'll do it. And what he learned was the key point from this older gentleman was the road to wealth when he decided that he found that the road to wealth was when he decided that a part of all he earned was his to keep. Let me read that again. A part of all he earned was his to keep. And that anybody could do that simply by paying themselves before spending any money. Paying themselves first before they spend any money. So think about this. Think about the IRS, because the IRS is very smart and they really get this concept, because what do? They pay themselves first with what? With your money, with our money during each pay period, right? They get their money up front, then we get what's left over. So the book suggests that we pay ourselves at least 10% of all that we earn. Now, as a high income earner like you, I recommend a minimum of 20% or more. But again, if you're just starting out and you can only do 10%, do 10%. And if you're not diligent enough to do this yourself, no worries. Then just have somebody else set it up for you so it's automated each month. So it actually comes out of your check or your checking account, just like the IRS takes their money for your taxes too, for the taxes that they take out. So the main difference between wealthy and poor people is knowing this very, very first rule: pay yourself first. Wealthy people pay themselves first, while poor broke people don't. All right. Lesson number two is this: live below your means. Now, this is one of the concepts that many of the younger docs and high income professionals, it seems to me like they can't really grasp this concept. And it's simply this: live on less than you earn. And you maybe say, well, of course, Jeff, we're going to live on less than we earn. But how many people do you know that make two, three, $400,000 a year and spend two, three, or $400,000 a year or more? They're living on what they earn or more. So whenever I recommend this to somebody getting right out of training or starting off their career, live, live below your means, or maybe they've been in their career for a little bit. Here's a couple of excuses that start flying around. You know what, Jeff? It's so hard to do this because the more that we make, the more our expenses will always keep growing. Or I'll get this one occasionally. You know what? My spouse, you know what? They're the ones that always take care of the bills. They pay the bills, and I'm not really sure what's happening with the money each month. Well, I can guarantee you that it's going to be very, very hard to reach some level of financial independence if you're married and both of you guys aren't on the same page. Now, if I can actually get to somebody as soon as they start working, whether they get out of college or some sort of professional school, to encourage them to keep living like they were still in medical school or dental school or college or whatever, just for those first 3, 4, 5 years right after they get out, then I'm telling you, they'll have so much better chance of building wealth versus those that don't. And it would also help them to ingrain this habit, live on less than they make. Now, in the US, the national physician salary is roughly about $300,000. And if you follow rule number one and you save at least 10%, that is 30%. So 30% of $300,000 is 10% of $300,000 is $30,000. So that would give this particular person, the average physician, $270,000 to live on. Now, if you can't live on $270,000 a year, making $300,000 a year, then you may have bigger problems that need to be addressing. All right. Most millionaires state that finance is actually 80% behavior and 20% knowledge, meaning you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be an attorney, you don't have to be an engineer to become rich. It's simply adopt and apply good money habits. All right, number three, make your money work for you. Now, this lesson actually reminds me of two verses that are in the Bible, which the first one is Proverbs 21:20. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. 1 Corinthians 16:2. Only the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Now, in the book, Arcad recommended investing only in things that he was knowledgeable about. Now, I can tell you there's not a day that goes by that I don't come across something, either like an article or a video or something like that, about investing in Bitcoin or some other type of cryptocurrency. And time again, I just see too many people lose money on these risky investments that they don't have a clue about. even though maybe their financial advisor or their friend or relative recommended, hey, you need to get into this because it's the next big thing. So if you want to invest in index funds, well, learn about index funds first. If you want to invest in bonds or any type of bonds, learn about that first. If you're interested in investing in real estate, then you should know how to evaluate a property before you put any money into it, right? And I have a very, very simple way that you can do this simply by hitting the subscribe button and then downloading the passive income guide I've put together just for you by clicking the link below this video. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't have to become a professional in whatever you're wanting to invest in. It, but what I want you to do is at least learn enough to be able to ask whoever's offering the investment smart questions. All right, this leads us to step number 4. That is, insure yourself. And this is really fantastic advice that unfortunately many younger professionals don't consider. I know I didn't when first starting out in your career or in their career. Now, I remember the first few years after I started up my practice from scratch, really all I could do those first probably 2 to 3 years would just barely make ends meet. And I was, I mean, if you've learned about my story, I was even going back to what I used to do in high school and college, mowing yards as a periodontist. I was probably one of the most well-trained yard guys in the country, but you know what? You got to do what you got to do when to put food on the table when you got a 2-month old and you're broke and you got $300,000 of student loan debt. So it's what you got to do. And but again, I was focused on doing that. I wasn't focused on all the different types of insurances that I probably should have gotten back then. So getting all of the adequate or kind of recommended insurance policies needed, during that time, it really just wasn't on my radar. But now I really realize that a lot of these are necessary expenses. So you want to make sure that you have insurance coverage in place really as soon as you start working at whatever career you are, because it's going to help safeguard your wealth by absorbing potential loss and really helping to mitigate your financial situation. Now, I know there's several different types of policies out there that that you should consider, but only purchase those you actually need, or if you're having trouble, hook up with a local agent that can really help guide you through the process. And another thing to consider is actually each year reevaluate all your policies. Are you still having the adequate coverage that you need? Should you go up on some? Should you go down on some? Or should you get rid of some altogether? So, for example, we actually noticed a few years ago that our health insurance premiums, they sent us a notice that they were actually going to triple. And I was like, that's just crazy. So I started researching and talking to people, looking at stuff online, and I narrowed it down between two different things, and I wound up dropping my insurance policy, and we went with the much more affordable option, which I really like. It's called MetaShare. All right, number 5, wealth building lesson. Your home is your biggest expense. Now, of all the financial lessons mentioned in the book, this one could probably be the most debatable. Now, I completely understand the principle behind it. So rather than pay a landlord rent each month, it's better to obtain a mortgage and then eventually own the home that you're actually living in. And our homes are potentially the biggest expense that we're going to have to tackle along with taxes. And you know what? There's really nothing wrong with following this lesson as long as we approach it correctly. Now, if you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, then you know that the author, Robert Kiyosaki, he actually claims that our home is not an asset and that we should rent a home, never own a home, rent a home unless the only time that you want to own a home if somebody is renting it from you to pay you. On the flip side, if you follow Dave Ramsey's real estate potential principles, then whenever you're buying a home, because a lot of times when you get out of training, you're not really sure how to go about it, down payment, what type of mortgage. He recommends a few things. His real estate principles state this: whenever you purchase a home, you always want to put at least 20% down. You always want to use a fixed 15-year mortgage, and you want to make sure that your monthly payment is going to be no more than 25% of your monthly take home pay, not gross, because when you get the loan, it's typically going to be based on your gross. He recommends no more than 25% of your take home pay. Now, you probably remember back in 2008 when a lot of people got burned during the crash because they decided to take on these huge mortgages. And then what happened? Once the real estate market tanked, they were left with these huge homes, and these huge homes, they dropped 50, 60, some of them 70% in value, thus making a lot of them go into foreclosure. So if you follow lesson two and you live below your means, then you're going to be in a much better financial shape when it comes to making these larger purchases in the future. All right, lesson number six is talks about a retirement plan. So if you're a 25-year-old person and you earn $40,000 a year, and each year you get an annual raise of 3%, what that means is they're going to have an estimated $3 million saved up. Again, only making $40,000 a year at age 65. And that's really the power of, starting early and compound interest. So the book recommends that we should have some sort of retirement plan in place if we're going to want to retire at some point. And we can do this with, again, these sound financial principles that they've been talking about, and set aside money to be invested. And they recommend, accounts like 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, something like that. And the younger that we can start putting this money away for retirement, they recommend the better. And by doing this, again, we take advantage of something very magical called compound interest. Ben Franklin actually said compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world. Question: did you know that good old Ben left actually 1,000 pounds, which is about equivalent to $5,000 in today's money, when he died? And when he died, he left that money in a trust, and he bequeathed that trust and left it to his two favorite cities, Philadelphia and Boston. And he left it to those two cities with the provision that the money was to remain untouched for as long as 200 years. And what they found was what was left in the trust after it grew was basically to the amount of 2 million bucks that was given to Philadelphia, and $5 million given to Boston, all with only $5,000. So the lesson that we can learn from this is to make time work for us when we plan for retirement. Again, plan on starting as early as possible, because time can be our retirement's greatest friend. And last but not least, the seventh lesson from the book is this: we need to consider investing in ourselves. And one of the best ways that we can continue to increase what we earn is by investing, not only just investing in the stock market or real estate or whatever, but also invest in the most important asset, that is you. And real estate mogul Grant Cardone is really, really big. He's always harping on this. And I talk to busy professionals pretty much on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. And I realize that many of them they're just so eager to start investing, like in real estate and other types of investments. But Cardone really cautions them, especially when they first start out, to really just slow down and think about what they want to do, but start off by putting as much money as they can early on, and invest in themselves, and really get good at what they know how to do before they do anything else. Because you are your most important asset. Your income is going to be the most powerful wealth building tool. So the better that you get at anything, the more money you're going to make, right? And when you think about it, there's literally no excuse regarding lack of information. Why? Well, think about it. We have access to literally any type of information that we need via the internet. And what we used to take, old folks like me to research at libraries, now takes seconds. Perfect example is this YouTube channel that you're watching right now. And thank you for watching. Pretty much everything that I learned and every connection that I made was pretty much free on the internet. So If I can do it, you can do it. All right, let me give you a very quick recap of the 7 wealth building lessons from the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Number 1, pay yourself first. Number 2, live below your means. 3, make your money work for you. 4, insure yourself against loss. 5, our home is our biggest expense. 6, make sure you have a retirement plan in place. And last but not least, number 7, invest in yourself. Now, speaking of number 5, which is our home is our biggest expense, what I'd like for you to do next is check out this video right here, where I actually break out the difference between what Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki have to say about whether or not we should buy a home, or should we rent a home, or what we should really do in order to build real wealth. Which is better, buy or rent? And then I go into very, very much detail about both. So you want to check that out. I'll see you in the next video.